With permission, Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, I will make a statement to the House on the situation in Turkey and Syria. I know the House will join me in offering sincere condolences to all those affected by the recent earthquakes. I witnessed firsthand last week the terrible scale of human suffering when I visited Turkey. I also had the opportunity to speak to Syrian partners and the United Nations about their work on the immediate response. I pay tribute to the hundreds of British personnel engaged in specialist health, humanitarian and rescue work in Syria and Turkey. I saw for myself the outstanding work that Britain is doing on the ground to save lives and support those who are suffering. There has been, throughout these events and our responses, excellent coordination across the Foreign Office, Ministry of Defence and Department of Health. Today, Madam Deputy Speaker, the death toll across Turkey and Syria stands at more than 48,000 and at least 118,000 people have been injured. Around 25 million people have been affected, with homes, businesses and key infrastructure destroyed. The further earthquakes on the 20th and 27th of February, which have tragically led to additional deaths, show that the danger has not passed. In Syria, this disaster adds to years of turmoil inflicted by conflict, striking hardest in the very place that has borne the brunt of Assad's war machine. I turn, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the initial response. Turkey requested international support immediately after the earthquakes. The UK government delivered aid as swiftly as possible, working closely with Turkey, the United Nations, international partners and NGOs and charities. This included deploying a 77-strong search and rescue team in Turkey, along with state-of-the-art heavy equipment. We quickly announced £4.3 million in new support to Syria Civil Defence, the White Helmets, who have carried out search and rescue operations in 60 villages, helping thousands of civilians. The British government also rapidly engaged with the Turkish government at the highest level. The Foreign Secretary, my noble friend Lord Ahmed, and I immediately spoke to the senior UN humanitarian officials to ensure a rapid and coordinated response in Syria. As part of the immediate response, the Ministry of Defence and Foreign Office set up a field hospital in Turkoglu. This includes an emergency department and a 24/7 operating theatre. And I saw for myself UK Med and Ministry of Defence personnel, 150 of them, working side by side with Turkish medics to save lives. I was deeply impressed and moved during my visit by the life-saving work these teams are doing. Together, they have treated more than 5,000 patients so far. Meanwhile, the UK has delivered 465 tonnes of relief items to Turkey and Syria through civilian and Royal Air Force flights. This includes tents and thermal blankets for families made homeless in freezing conditions, solar lanterns, water purification tablets and hygiene kits. On the 15th of February, we announced a further £25 million of funding to bolster our humanitarian response. This is supporting the work of the UN and aid agencies on the ground in Syria, helping communities ravaged by war as well as this natural disaster. It also continues to support the recovery effort in Turkey, led by their government. Beyond our support to the White Helmets, UK-funded charities and NGOs in northern Syria have cared for the injured through mobile medical teams and health centres. The UN has distributed food and other essential items to which the UK has contributed. Further assistance will be delivered in the coming days as part of the UN's Syria Cross-Border Humanitarian Fund, to which the UK is one of the most significant donors. The fund has already allocated $50 million to scale up the response. There is a particular focus on displaced families, the elderly, women, children and people with disabilities. The UK has also supported and bolstered the response through our existing support to key multilateral organisations that are helping in Turkey and Syria. The UN's Global Fund Education Cannot Wait announced a $7 million grant for Syrian children affected by the earthquake, and the Global Partnership for Education will also provide $3.75 million to support the emergency education response. The UK is one of the most significant donors to both funds. We are also a long-standing partner and donor to the World Bank, which announced a $1.7 billion to assist Turkey, and the United Nations Central Emergency Response Fund, the CERF, which has released $50 million for the crisis. Most significant is that our constituents, the British public, have demonstrated extraordinary generosity through the Disasters Emergency Committee appeal, raising more than £100 million. This figure includes £5 million from the UK taxpayer in matched seed funding. In the UK, Madam Deputy Speaker, His Majesty the King visited Turkish diaspora groups and members of the British Syrian community at Syria House, a donation point in Trafalgar Square in London, on the 14th of February, and my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, also visited Syria House on the 16th of February. It is clearly vital to ensure that humanitarian aid reaches those who need it as efficiently as possible in Syria. I will continue to engage with the United Nations to ensure maximum access for as long as required. We welcome the accelerated pace of United Nations deliveries and are monitoring the situation closely in the Security Council in New York. The House will understand that the scale of this tragedy is immense. The UK will continue to stand in solidarity with Turkey and with the people of Syria during these most testing of times. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Rico Gill.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to thank the Right Honourable Member for Sutton Coldfield for giving me advance sight of his statement. Madam Deputy Speaker, we've all been deeply shocked by the scenes from Turkey and northwest Syria. The damage done and the loss of life inflicted by these earthquakes and aftershocks is incomprehensible. The death toll between the two countries has surpassed 48,000 people. About 25 million people, a staggering figure, have been affected overall, with homes, businesses and key infrastructure destroyed. We are looking at a damage area of over 50,000 square kilometres. The Labour Party, and I'm sure each member present today, sends our deepest condolences, our thoughts and sympathies to all those whose lives have been devastated by this appalling tragedy. The many heartfelt contributions from members across this House in the Westminster Hall debate last Thursday demonstrate the strength of support for the people of Syria and Turkey at this time. Turkey is, of course, a close NATO ally and the partner of the United Kingdom, and there are many close ties of family and friendship between us, as with the people of Syria, many of whom have fled from the crisis there to be in the United Kingdom. We are duty-bound as a nation to respond to the challenges posed by this disaster, not just in the short term, but in the long term too, even as the cameras and headlines move on. While we have seen countless images of despair and devastation, I'm sure that all of us have heard the stories of bravery, resilience and hope. I hope that this disaster can show that the spirit of humanitarianism still prevails across much of the world. The response of the British public has, of course, been incredible. Over 30 million donated to the Disasters Emergency Committee appeal in its first day, which has now raised over 100 million. This shows the British public at its best. Generous, outward-looking and deeply concerned for the welfare of others around the globe. And I would like to take this opportunity to express my thanks to the search and rescue teams that sprang to action within hours of the tragedy to assist in saving people trapped under the rubble of buildings that have collapsed. Speed was absolutely critical in those 72 hours, and I was very proud to see how quickly British forces mobilised on a flight out to Gaziantep. In particular, I want to give my thanks to the volunteers from West Midlands Fire Service, Shayam, Sean, Mark, Agia, James, Mark, Joe and Paul, who flew out to Turkey, and Rob and Hannah, who supported from the United Kingdom. The UK government was right to respond quickly in those first 72 hours, and our support to the white helmets was vital while humanitarian access to northwest Syria was impeded. And the delivery of medical assistance, rescue equipment and sniffer dogs to the disaster area has been important to help people in the immediate aftermath. However, we are now in a new phase of our response. Our support must not stop there. People are in need of emergency accommodation, food, healthcare, water and sanitary health, and the largest single need is for emergency shelter in both countries. The earthquake has not only resulted in additional displacement, but has also diminished the prospects for safe return of internally displaced persons from earthquake-affected areas. Even before the earthquake, an estimated 4.1 million people in northwest Syria relied on aid to meet their basic needs. And the UN estimates that in northwest Syria, 120 schools have been destroyed and 57 hospitals have been partially damaged or forced to suspend their services following the earthquakes. That is absolutely devastating. And for those who survive, hunger, dirty water, or the bitter winter cold still pose a significant threat. It is in Britain's interest to support Turkey and Syria. It hosts the largest number of Syrian refugees displaced abroad due to the country's civil war, and in some of the affected areas, 50% of the population in Turkey are refugees. Through multilateralism and common purpose, we can stand together in the face of tragedy and do more than we can alone. The work that the UK has supported through our multilateral partners is significant, and a reminder of the many important partnerships that the UK has led in and often helped found over the years. The UN appeals for Turkey and Syria have now been announced with a combined $1.4 billion requested for both countries over the next 3 months. And as yet, the UK has not announced any further direct support since the launch of these two appeals. What is the Minister doing to coordinate and scale up the humanitarian response with our international partners in the United Nations? And of the 30 million announced so far, can he say over what time frame that will be dispersed? How will this be distributed between the two countries? And crucially, can he confirm where that support has been drawn from and that it will not be taken from other planned in-country work or other humanitarian crises, such as in East Africa or Yemen? According to reports in December, the Syria country team was asked to find cuts of between 6 to 8 million. This would be utterly unconscionable in light of this disaster, which has befallen people who have already suffered so much. So can the Minister today confirm whether these cuts will still be going ahead? Ministers have been asked about this twice now, and I've not answered either time, so I'd be grateful for some answers today. Madam Deputy Speaker, humanitarian access in Syria remains an ongoing challenge. The obstruction of Bab al-Hawa, the only border crossing into Syria, in the first week following the earthquake meant life-saving support couldn't reach people who needed it. It has been disgraceful to see the damage that Russia's political game playing on the UN Security Council has done to people there by restricting humanitarian access. It is important and welcome, therefore, that the UN has brokered an agreement to reopen 2 further crossings for 3 months. However, this agreement must be extended. Most of the aid packages crossing the border have only a 12-week lifespan. Moreover, UN convoys are severely lagging compared to before the earthquake. On average, before the earthquake, roughly 650 to 700 trucks per month were passing through, but now with 2 more crossing points available, only 493 have accessed northwest Syria. A long-term strategy for aid and support is needed. What diplomatic efforts is the UK making to extend this agreement beyond 3 months and hold authorities to their word on humanitarian access? And will the Minister set out a long-term strategy for the UK support to the region? And does he recognise the interplay between the earthquake and the conflict in Syria? Thank you.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady both for her comments and the tone in which she delivered. The House is completely united on occasions like this, and particularly on this occasion. And she underlined the British commitment and that of our constituents. I agree with her about the extraordinary international response across so many different countries which she mentioned. She also mentioned the search and rescue team, which of course left from the airport close to her and my constituency of Birmingham. And she also mentioned the British strong support to the White Helmets, whose leadership I met on my recent visit. She asked about tents and blankets. I can tell her that Britain has delivered something like 3,350 tents to both Syria and Turkey, and thermal blankets, 24,000 to Turkey and 17,000 to Syria, making a total of 41,000. She also mentioned the damage that has been done to schools, and I mentioned in my statement that we have allocated, or that Education Cannot Wait has allocated $7 million as a result of this crisis. But I was in Geneva a couple of weeks ago for the replenishment for Education Cannot Wait, and Britain was able to find an additional £80 million to support that very important work that Education Cannot Wait is conducting. She asked me about cuts in Syria. I can tell her that in 2021 we pledged £205 million for Syria, but we actually delivered £232 million. This year the figure has been reduced, but we are confident that by the end of this month £158 million will have been delivered. I would just emphasise to her that in terms of the support for refugees from Syria, Britain has contributed very substantially to that over the years since this crisis first started in Syria, and in fact have contributed more than the whole of the European Union added together, a figure of something like £3.8 billion. And finally, on the crossings, which she asked me about, she is right that there have been considerable difficulties. In the early stage, the one crossing that was open was damaged by the earthquake. But the most recent information indicates that, 358 trucks have got across from Bab al-Hawa, 82 trucks have now got through at Bab al-Salam, and 16 at Al-Rai. So that's something of the order of 456 trucks. So the food and the supplies are moving.
To Matthew Offord.
Deputy Speaker, 2 weeks ago I was in Syria and saw for myself the refusal to open the borders with Turkey and the reticence of the Syrian government to allow humanitarian aid to enter the northeast autonomous region was causing additional suffering. But does the Minister share my revulsion that the drone missile attacks have also continued with the killing of a Syrian Defence Force soldier as recently as the 12th of February in Kobani whilst I was there?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend has seen at first hand the impact of the Syrian regime on those poor people who have suffered not only from Assad and the Russian war machine, but now suffer from this dreadful earthquake. I would say to him that the access, which he rightly says is desperately needed, was the result of the negotiations by the head of UN OCHA, Martin Griffiths, who deserves considerable credit for the speed and efficacy of the way he got them opened.
SNP spokesperson Martin Doherty-Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and let me also thank the Minister for early sight of his statement. And also let me join the House in expressing condolences and sympathy on behalf of these benches to the peoples of Turkey and Syria who have suffered the most powerful earthquakes in the region for over 80 years, releasing the catastrophes we see now compounding the peoples of the region. With an estimated 500,000 people of Turkish origin living across the UK and an estimated 28,000 Syrian nationals, I think we can all agree on how personal much of this loss is to many of our constituents. And also let me welcome the Department's decision to send further support to Turkey and commend the Department for coordinating with the UN on support for those in Syria. That said, it's always important for the international community must continue to listen to those on the ground, including the UN, the Red Crescent and, of course, the White Helmets in the coming days and weeks, so that we can deliver the best relief and assistance possible. And I'm sure the Minister and the Department are doing just that. So let me ask three specific questions. My honourable friend, the Member for Inverness, Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey, in a written parliamentary question, has already asked the International Development Minister whether the Department plans to provide additional funding to the World Food Programme to help tackle immediate humanitarian needs in both Turkey and Syria. The Minister responded, and I quote, "The UK currently has no plans to provide additional funding to the World Food Programme." The reason this question has been asked, Madam Deputy Speaker, is because the World Food Programme says it requires $46 million over the next 3 to 4 months to address the immediate needs. So will, first of all, the Minister reconsider not pledging to the World Food Programme and make a substantial donation? In addition, the European Commission has announced it will organise a donor conference for Syria and Turkey to mobilise funding to be held in March. Can the Minister provide clarity on their government's attendance, as they are eligible to attend, and ask that his government pledges generously and early to that campaign? And finally, the US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces in the north-east have pledged to facilitate the delivery of aid, and it's been reported that the United States will fly aid to Qamishli, a city controlled by the SDF, where it will be transported to the land by the affected region. Can the Minister for International Development outline whether UK aid will be flown in through that route as well?
Well, I thank the front-bench spokesman from the SNB for his comments, and I thank him also for his words about the work of British service personnel and search and rescue personnel and others also within my department, and the hard work throughout many nights and days when this terrible event took place. He asked me particularly 3 questions. When it comes to funding for the World Food Programme, we are very significant funders of the World Food Programme, and as to whether we decide to use that route to help additionally now in Syria and Turkey, we'll have to wait and see. But at the moment, we have responded and we have made sure that UK aid gets through to those who need it at this point in the crisis. He asks whether funding will be considered for the replenishment conference or the Turkey-Syria fundraising conference. We will look at that at the time, but I want to assure him and assure the House that we have been right up there in the lead on making sure that critical needs are met. And on the third and final question he asked, we will make sure in every way we can that aid gets through to people in the northeast of Syria. We will use whatever means are available to us, and as I hope he has seen from what has happened already, Britain has not been shy in pressing these points to make sure that the aid does indeed get through.
Robert Courts.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Would the Minister join with me in thanking, in particular, my constituents at Royal Air Force Brize Norton for the significant help that they've given to the people of Turkey? I'm thinking in particular of the Tactical Medical Wing, who have been deployed and are giving the medical assistance that he spoke of, but also the wider Air Mobility Force, who, on top of significant other tasking requirements, have moved this aid so swiftly. Simply put, without them, British aid wouldn't be going anywhere, and they ought to have our thanks.
Minister.
I very much agree with my honourable friend. He is right that the support of the Royal Air Force has been quite exceptional during this crisis, and across Whitehall, the Ministry of Defence, the Foreign Office, the Department of Health, there has, if I may say, Madam Deputy Speaker, been a quite unusual degree of cohesion and excellent cooperation.
Chair of the International Development Committee, Sarah Champion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Minister for this statement and his personal interest in this topic. It's been fantastic to see the international community come together to support this region. But as we move from the rescue to the recovery phase of the earthquake response, I wonder if you could give more detail about the UK Government's long-term commitment to NGOs and UN partners, particularly in Syria, which is already suffering hugely, and if you could focus on the help the communities will get to rebuild their lives.
Minister.
I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for what she has said. The international community has done extraordinarily well rallying together to meet the needs of that the Turkish government has set out and to estimate and try to meet the needs in northern Syria. The cooperation between Greece and Turkey, for example, has been enormously heartening. In terms of the response, she will appreciate that the £100 million that has been raised from across our country will go to 15 of British and international charities, which are household names. We have allocated £43.3 million across the piece on this. That has gone to pay for the search and rescue, the medical work in Turkey, the UK and aid agencies that are working inside Syria, and of course the White Helmets funding of £4.3 million goes to help the 3,000 White Helmets who are operating in northern Syria, and in particular in 60 different areas. But I think the House has also to look at the multilateral pound, the money that is going in that I mentioned through the SURF fund, which was invented by Britain, and to which we have contributed since its inception $1.7 billion. That fund will be deployed in both countries. I've already mentioned Education Cannot Wait, but the GPE programme on education has allocated £3.75 million. So the effect of all of this will be a very substantial British input, but I can give her the assurance that we will watch carefully what is going on, and if further British leadership and British money is required, then we will certainly consider deploying it.
Louis French.
The earthquakes in Turkey and Syria have been heartbreaking to watch, and I welcome the support His Majesty's government have provided, and I also pay tribute to the British rescue teams. As always, our community in Bexley have come together with care and compassion following the disaster, with many local businesses and residents donating what they could. Will my right honourable friend join me in thanking all the local residents in Bexley, especially Councillor Andy Dormush and the Turkish School at Blackfen School, Sidcup Partners, St John's Church Sidcup, Barry and the Welling Town Centre businesses, the Lighthouse Charity for all their efforts in collecting donations and vital aid?
Yes, I thank my honourable friend for saying what is happening in Bexley, and all across the country our constituents have responded magnificently to the appalling situation in Turkey and Syria. It is on occasions like this that we see, I think, Britain at its best, going first and with effect to people who are in desperate jeopardy.
Leila Moran.
Deputy Speaker, the scenes in Turkey and northern Syria are without doubt a tragedy, and my heart goes out to all those who have lost their lives and also find themselves without shelter or sanitation. This has also been a very difficult time for the diaspora here at home, and it is vital that the government shows global leadership, not just in aid, but also to help those to get out if they need it. So I ask, will the government consider introducing a new expedited temporary visa scheme, as has been introduced in Germany, for those with relatives here in the UK, so they can come and stay with their families and get the support they desperately need?
Well, we have no plans to introduce the scheme of the type that she has described, but I can tell her that the visa centre in Adana is now back open, and the consular services that we are able to offer, particularly in Turkey, obviously, are up and running, and were back up and running very quickly after the crisis struck. So I hope that she will feel that although we cannot make any commitment to a scheme of the type that she describes, we are doing everything we can to ensure that the normal consular services and visa services are available.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Clearly this is a humanitarian disaster of a massive scale, and I commend my right honourable friend for the work he's doing, as I would expect, given his long experience in this field. The British people have been incredibly generous, as he said, with £100 million donated. Given that all of our condolences and thoughts are with the families, those affected by this earthquake, what advice can my right honourable friend give to those that want to give money to ensure this gets to the front line? How do they give it? Where do they give it? And can we make sure that organisations that maybe are not acting in the best interests of the people affected do not get the money?
Well, my honourable friend asks an extremely important question, because people are still seeking to give donations because they can see the full scale of what has happened. And the answer to his question is the Disasters Emergency Committee appeal. This is a highly effective way of getting money through to 15 immensely respected organisations who really can deliver on the ground. So the details are available online still. Delivering money to the Disasters Emergency Committee will get through to where it's really needed.
Michael Clark.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was pleased to hear about the Minister's trip to Turkey and the continued aid support to Turkey and Syria. The Minister will know that thousands of my constituents are personally impacted by the earthquake. They've lost loved ones and friends, and hundreds have written to me and government ministers. They want to provide temporary relief to family members who have lost everything. So can the Minister tell me why the government will not support their calls for an expedited temporary visa scheme?
Here. Minister.
Well, we do not believe, Madam Speaker, that is the right way to handle the situation in Turkey which she describes, and I know that in her constituency she has many families that are suffering, and to which the whole House will want to send their condolences. What I can say is that I saw for myself on my visit on the 19th of February to Turkey the quite extraordinary work that was being done by 150 British medical and military personnel on the ground there, working with their Turkish counterparts, not only in the field hospital set up by the Ministry of Defence and the Foreign Office, but also in the two British emergency medical clinics. So I can tell her that in terms of the need on the ground there, Britain has been doing everything it can to help. And I have seen for myself both the shattered towns and cities in the aftermath of the earthquake, and also the brilliant work that is being done by Britain together with our Turkish counterparts to try and make things better.
Simpson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his comprehensive and I think reassuring statement today that demonstrates that the UK is more than playing its part in delivering the vital humanitarian aid that's needed in Syria and in Turkey. And to that end, can I ask my right honourable friend whether the additional commitment that he's made to the Education Cannot Wait UK Global Fund will mean that the amount of funding that's already been announced is likely to grow in the future as we hopefully move to a rebuild and recovery part of this disaster, because education is going to be key for many of those children who've lost their schools.
My honourable friend is absolutely right to make the point about the need to restore schools. Otherwise, on top of everything else, these children are going to miss out on education, one of the key ladders for opportunity in their later lives. And Education Cannot Wait, a charity that Britain has been enormously supportive of, is one of the key areas that can make an immediate effect. And that is why we were so pleased to see them responding with this $7 million support in the immediate aftermath of the earthquake.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many people in the Wirral have been fundraising as well, and it is so good to see Britain coming together. And I know because of that, the Minister will have given the thanks of everyone in this House to our brilliant civil servants who've been helping, and all of those that he has met who've been engaging in the response. But could I just ask him about what he said about the United Nations and whether he thinks that we can get better collaboration and support now in pursuit of safety and care for civilians in Syria?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her comments, and she knows a lot about these difficulties, and she rightly says that the United Nations is the key to restoring the lives and basic services and abilities to survive of people caught up in this terrible earthquake in northern Syria. And I believe that Martin Griffiths and his colleagues across the 6 agencies that are actively taking aid into northern Syria have wrestled at speed and with effect at the early problems, some of which were as a result of the earthquake damaging the infrastructure of these crossings. And I think now she can have confidence, as I have confidence, that the UN is delivering on the ground.
Kate Osmore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Minister for coming to the Chamber and giving us this statement today. But natural disasters like this show the importance of having a well-funded crisis reserve that can provide timely emergency aid. Previously, that reserve totalled $500 million, yet today it is now only $30 million. Can the Minister explain how this has been allocated this year and whether he will use it to support relief efforts until the end of this financial year?
Minister.
Well, the Honourable Lady makes a good point about the importance of a crisis reserve. That is the reason why Britain set up the SURF, the fund I mentioned earlier, which is now deploying $50 million. So she's entirely right about that. That's the multilateral spend. In terms of the bilateral spend, the humanitarian budget has a degree of flex within it. It is not as tightly restricted as the core international development budgets are. So on the humanitarian side, we are able to exercise our judgment on how to deploy limited funds to best possible effect.
Chiamora.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the earthquakes in Syria and Turkey have shocked and appalled us all. And for the Turkish and Syrian communities in Newcastle, that horror is particularly close. They want to know why so many died, why it was so deadly, and what they can do to help. Could the Minister say why his understanding of why so many relatively new buildings collapsed? And could he also look at the issue of cross-border remittances so that the proceeds of the extensive fundraising that diaspora communities are undertaking can be transferred as effectively and easily and quickly as possible?
Minister.
Well, I thank her very much for her comments, and in particular about the support which her constituents in Newcastle have been giving. She asked me specifically what people can do to help. I think I've made clear that I think the Disasters Emergency Committee appeal is the right way for our constituents to assist. She asks me why so many have died and why so many buildings collapsed. I think that is a matter for the Turkish authorities primarily to address, and it's clear from what the press in Turkey are saying that that is a point that people in Turkey are themselves pursuing vigorously. And in terms of cross-border remittances, I will have a look at that and write to her, because she's quite right that ease of remittancing is extremely important. It's something which we try to facilitate in many parts of the world, and I will look and see whether we could do any more in that respect.
Alex Davis-Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. All of our thoughts are with those impacted by the horrendous earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. And I commend all of the brilliant community groups across the UK who are doing incredible fundraising work. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm due to attend one myself this weekend in Treforest in my constituency. But it is currently estimated that there are 24,000 women due to give birth in Turkey in the impacted areas affected by the earthquake. And there's very little specialised maternal support, gynaecological support for these women to help them give birth safely. What more can the UK Government do to support these women specific with healthcare needs to help them give birth in a safe environment?
Minister.
Well, I thank her for her comments, and I hope that she will also pass them on to the community groups which she is seeing this weekend. In terms of the 24,000 women who are in jeopardy in the way that she described, we have seen vividly on our television screens exactly how that can impact people who are caught under the rubble in awful circumstances. We have been at great intent to ensure not only that tents and thermal blankets get through, but also that hygiene kits get through, that water and sanitation gets through, and that basic healthcare is restored. And all of those things will play a part in helping address the problem which she so rightly brings before the House.
Alan Dorrans.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and good afternoon. I thank the Minister for his statement. Madam Deputy Speaker, as tragically demonstrated, earthquakes are hugely unpredictable. What preparation and contingency planning is the United Kingdom Government making for future earthquakes in that region?
Well, the government considers all these matters in terms of humanitarian need and resilience, not just in this region and with earthquakes, but in many regions of the world facing many other challenges, most of which, but not all, result substantially from climate change. So he may rest assured that in all these matters of preparation, we are considering them every day and every week, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I thank the